Belgioioso Cheese is a family-owned and operated company specializing in artisan Italian cheesemaking. Using only natural ingredients and fresh local Wisconsin milk, master cheesemakers handcraft the full line of exceptional cheeses, guided by a commitment to quality and a respect for tradition. Ask your distributor about Belgioioso's award-winning fresh mozzarella, burrata, ricotta, mascarpone, American Grana, and Parmesan. At Belgioioso, every cheese is a specialty.
Is Wendy's in freefall? Is McDonald's to blame? And can anyone stop Dutch Bros? Welcome to Extra Serving, a podcast from Nation's Restaurant News. I'm Sam Oches, editor-in-chief, joined by my colleague, executive editor, Alicia Kelso. Alicia, busy week. Lots of earnings this week.
Yeah, and next week is busier, and the week after that is busier still. It's a love-hate relationship for me.
It is like the Super Bowl, but if the Super Bowl happened every day for 4 weeks. So,
yeah, exactly like that.
Super Bowl every day for 4 weeks. Just a thought there. Football, why not give it a try? Well, at least we have a holiday on Monday. Everybody's going to be listening to this on Tuesday. Our apologies, but because of President's Day, well, that has to be respected. We got to take President's Day off. So you're listening to this on Tuesday. We're recording this on Friday. But we don't get a holiday truly, Alicia, because our kids are off from school on Monday. My kids are off today. They get a 4-day weekend, although George also gets a 4-day weekend. So we'll just continue to be as frazzled as ever over the weekend.
I don't know if he's gone to school this year.
I
Between the weather and...
I sometimes wonder about the Louisville public school system, because you guys sure do like to take days off.
We sure do. We sure do.
I sympathize with you, but at least you have bourbon, and some darn good bourbon at that.
Appreciate that.
In your state. So let's get into it, Alicia. Lots to talk about this week, but holy smokes, do we have to start with Wendy's? My goodness. Wendy's reported this morning. And I'm still picking my jaw up off the floor. Perhaps you are as well, Alicia. And this is not good things, by the way, guys. This is not a jaw-dropping good thing. This is jaw-dropping in a very bad way. Wendy's fourth quarter same-store sales down 11%. This is a worse quarter than they've had in 20 years. It was worse than COVID. It's bad, Alicia. What's going on at Wendy's?
11.3, so mid 11 down. Yeah, holy Toledo, right?
Yeah.
And I think we expected the fourth quarter for Wendy's to be tough. I mean, I don't think it's a big secret that the company has had its struggles. They've had a significant amount of leadership turnover over the past 2 years. And they are now being run by an interim CEO who was only with the company a short time before he was thrust into that interim CEO role. Unusually, he put what's called a Project Fresh turnaround plan into place shortly after he was thrust into that role in October. We talked about the Project Fresh turnaround plan a little bit. We had some minor details about it, but now we know how urgent Wendy's is, and especially because that quarter was just so bad. And I think we were expecting bad. I don't think anybody expected worse than COVID, worse than recession, negative 11.3 bad. And the interim CEO, Kenneth Cook, he outlined what possibly could have been some of the reason behind this, including lapping a really successful fourth quarter 2024, where they had their SpongeBob collaboration, and that did really well, pushed the chain up 4.3. You and I both know that negative 11.3 is not just a comp thing, however. And so, we had this reiteration of Project Fresh on the call. A friend of mine this morning was discussing it with me. She said it was like boiling the ocean. There were so many initiatives that came out on this call. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. They need to do something. And a lot of it's very fundamental. I don't want to get carried away with there's too many plans into place. But some of this stuff is very fundamental. Operations, of course, starting with. They're beefing up their field team members to focus on turning around operations. I think they've gotten away from a little bit the well-oiled machine there. The closures we've talked about, 5 to 6%, which translates into about 300, 350 restaurants in the US. It's a big chunk of restaurants.
Big chunk.
There was a lot of talk about relevance. This was kind of my takeaway. And forgive me, this call happened about an hour and a half before we're recording this. So I am still very much unpacking this extensive transcript. But what stood out to me, Sam, obviously they called 2026 a quote rebuilding year. I think if you look at those numbers, no question it's a rebuilding year. It has to be. They have a mandate to turn this around. They did bring on Greg Creed and his consulting company as part of Project Fresh in the fall. And Greg Creed is as big a titan as it gets in the industry. And I could see his fingerprints all over this call. Discussions about getting back to top of mind, discussions about relevancy. Greg Creed is the guy that coined relevant, easy, distinctive, red for Yum, which has been their framework for forever and has been a very successful framework at that. So Wendy's, according to Cook, has not been relevant or top of mind. And that's a critical, that's a critical gap when customers who are going out to eat are choosing to go out to eat last minute. And, so I think that was really interesting. There's the relevant piece. Easy. He talked a lot about Wendy's digital growth. They're now at 20% of the mix. They're going to, continue to invest in digital capabilities to make consumers and team members' lives easier. There's the E. And then distinctive. Wendy's is known for being what they said, higher quality QSR. He said there is no burger news in 2025. And Wendy's is again, higher quality burger as it has pushed itself to be throughout its history. We're going to see more burger innovation this year. We're going to see higher quality burger innovation this year. And they're going to get back to the core, what has made Wendy's distinctive. We're also going to see a new chicken sandwich lineup coming in a couple months. They're just upgrading their chicken sandwich menu enhancements, menu upgrades, everything it takes to get back into that relevant category. Another interesting takeaway is we've seen Wendy's push and fail and push and fail and a third time push and fail in the breakfast category. And now Wendy's is giving franchisees the option to opt in to breakfast, which that's the best thing you can do because obviously restaurants differ by market, demographics. Taco Bell did this about a year and a half ago. Breakfast is a great idea on paper, but with labor costs as high as they are, they have to make sense. Right. Wendy's is not failing at breakfast. They're still very much going all in on breakfast and they have a right to win it in breakfast, as Cook mentioned, because they do have a differentiated menu there. They're just got to do it a little bit more smartly. And it goes back to the operations stuff. And we'll see if any of this gains traction. I lived in Columbus. You live in Columbus. We are cheering for Wendy's to not be negative 11.3%. And I really hope the first quarter is much better news than that. They did mention that there has been some sequential improvements. And they expect the year to be flat, which is better than negative 11.3.
Well, or what was the year 2025 for the year was down 8% for Wendy's, right?
I don't know.
The year was also down significantly. Alicia, if there's one sort of insight I pull from all of this, it's that we should blame SpongeBob. I think SpongeBob is to blame for this. If you're lapping a SpongeBob quarter, Burger King, beware, because I know Burger King was doing some SpongeBob stuff this year too. And SpongeBob will take you down. But in all seriousness, Alicia, I'm sort of shocked that the tendies did not give Wendy's more momentum, because as we're going to talk about with McDonald's, McDonald's had some decent success with their chicken rollouts last year, and in general, chicken has been a big win for any company that goes in that direction. And Wendy's had a big Wendy's tendies rollout, and crickets. Why do we think the tendies didn't work out so well?
It's a good question. It makes me wonder. And again, I'm still going through this transcript. I do think tendies was a bright spot, a really rare bright spot in this call. And they did mention that they did get a little bit of momentum from tendies. Obviously not enough to move a needle, but I don't know. I'm as like you, I'm still picking my jaw up off the floor about what is going on. Cook mentioned over and over again that the company has just gotten too far away from its core. And that was probably the biggest theme that I can derive at this point. And for example, what the marketing consulting group that Greg Creed runs is doing is they're doing a deep dive into their consumer analytics, looking at their core customers who cares about Wendy's to not only be loyalists, but to be frequent loyalists. And what they found is, you know, Wendy's was probably chasing too many silver bullets, right? So that Takis meal, I think, is a really, really good example here where we are seeing a faction of consumers get really adventurous with what they want to eat. We're seeing, more global influences proliferate across the industry. And Wendy's was trying to play in that game. But it was such a small faction of their customers when most of their customers do want that sort of better QSR burger, do want that chicken sandwich or better breakfast or whatever that Wendy's has done right for years and years and years. And they took their eye off the ball. And now they have a lot of work to do to get their eye back on the ball, which is why this Project Fresh is, again, to quote my friend, boiling the ocean. And so this is not, Wendy's is not the only company to stray from its core to its own detriment. And we can talk about Popeyes here in a little bit, which is another great example. So, and certainly we have case studies like this from casual dining all the way down to QSR, where companies just got a little bit too ahead of their skis on the fad or the trend of the day. Takis, let's go there. And it confuses customers, especially in this environment. They don't want they don't want bells and whistles. They want value and quality and a good experience. So I think that can't be lost either. This is not the environment to go out with bells and whistles.
Yeah, and I would also mention, I think the leadership transitions and turnover also where there's some instability. I mean, if you look at the past year, obviously CEO Kirk Tanner departed for Hershey's. Abigail Pringle, who was the president, she stepped down. Executive chef John Lee went to Wonder. There's been a lot of turnover there. And again, you talk about interim CEO Ken Cook. I mean, he had only been a CFO for a few months before he was thrust into that position, to your point. I believe they're actively searching for a long-term solution in the CEO role. Leadership has a lot to do with stability in a company. I think you're seeing some of that at Chipotle, which maybe we can talk about too. And it's not like, I mean, Scott Boatwright had been there for years and years, but he was thrust into that position of CEO when Brian Nichol left. And I think you can, there's a little bit of the sort of grasping for straws effect when you're probably on your back foot when you're in this position that you weren't expected to be in so soon or at all. So we'll talk about that all in a bit. We got to talk about, though, too, I question whether some of Wendy's struggles has to do with McDonald's, because as we saw earlier this week from McDonald's, they have some real momentum. Their same store sales in the fourth quarter were up almost 7%. And I just have to wonder if that's some sort of at the expense of Wendy's. I mean, it could be that Wendy's is losing some of their share to McDonald's, as McDonald's has built a lot of significant momentum, not only from its snack wrap, but as we saw in their earnings report, holy cow, they set a record with their Grinch meal. Alicia, tell us about that.
I'm so glad I got my hands on some Grinch socks.
I'm jealous. I'm very jealous. It has to be the socks. That's why people were getting it, I'm sure.
For 1 week, McDonald's was the largest seller of socks in the world. They sold 50 million socks. That's
50 million.
I never thought we would be having this conversation. I
know.
love that Grinch meal. It had everything. It was a good price point. It came with an incentive in in those socks. It came with another incentive in the shaker salt that had, it had existed for years and years in global markets. And now we get to try it and have a little bit of, experiential fun with McDonald's fries. It was so successful that they gained as much in sales from the Grinch meal promotion as they did from their wildly successful Minecraft meal and collectible cup promotion combined. And so that is a heck of a tailwind for McDonald's in Q4. I don't think it's certainly not the only tailwind. And I think the bigger story here is that McDonald's finally started gaining share again and traffic again among low income consumers. Now, this has been quite a journey for McDonald's, who started losing those low income consumers about mid 2024, about Q2 2024 is when we started hearing these conversations on earnings calls and elsewhere. And what was happening is, there was a reputation issue, if you will. We know that fast food pricing is about 30% higher than it was pre-pandemic. And that got carried away and proliferated on social media and to the detriment of McDonald's affordability reputation. It didn't help that there was like some, turnpike McDonald's location in Connecticut that had like a Big Mac meal for $18 that went viral too. And, that caused their U.S. president, Joe Erlinger, to come out and actually make a statement, which is extremely rare for the company. But mid 2024, they embark upon this value and, this value journey to try and correct that perception. And they had a $5 meal deal that came out shortly after that. In June and January, they had an entire McValue platform. And then by the mid 2025, we started understanding they were going to bring back their extra value meals. And then they extended those extra value meals. This is a traction that they have needed. They are now, again, they've regained market share among lower income consumers. They called that that was their ultimate objective. And CEO Chris Kempczinski basically said that's what they did. McDonald's is not going to get beat on value and affordability. It's in our DNA. Along that, he mentioned that franchisee cash flow is up. And so that's the sweet spot, right? Where we have found the cadence and value that after a year and a half of throwing ideas out there, we found the cadence and the franchisee cash flow it has increased. Now, I will be watching this. McDonald's has helped subsidize some of this with the losses that any franchisee gets from that extra value meal, I guess, discount. McDonald's also came out with a standardized, franchisee formula on how they need to approach value, which seemed a bit unusual because franchisees have long set their own pricing, and I know that made some of them uneasy. But this is an ongoing conversation. It seems for now they are very comfortable with where they are on that value cadence, and that contributed significantly to that plus 6.8 in the quarter, as well as lapping a fourth quarter 24 where they were just off the heels of an E. coli crisis too.
Yeah. Well, Alicia, I have to wonder, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, but, going back to your friend's term, boiling the ocean, to some degree, isn't McDonald's kind of doing the same? I don't know. Like there's a lot going on in McDonald's, much like there is at Wendy's, but for some reason it's working at McDonald's. I do wonder if some of it comes back to the value proposition. I wonder if McDonald's is more clearly defining its value proposition than Wendy's is. Because to your point, they're bringing back they're getting lower income consumers to return, which to me says they're doing a better job establishing why those consumers should return for the value of what they get. So no doubt there's excitement through Grinch socks and Minecraft meals and all these things. But at the end of the day, consumers come in the doors at McDonald's primarily because they know they're going to get bang for their buck. They're going to get value out of that experience. I just wonder, maybe that's part of the problem with Wendy's is not able to communicate that as well.
It could be, but you also see when McDonald's has like some kind of promotion, they're not throwing a whole lot of new things out there. They're just putting their stuff together and repackaging it. Now that's going to change. And I think that's a really interesting conversation from the call as well that, we could drill into for a whole other hour. But for the sake of time, McDonald's developed 3 category teams less than a year ago. One focused explicitly on beef, one on chicken, and one on beverages / desserts. We finally got some, input on how that's going from their chief restaurant experience officer, Jill McDonald. She got on the call and talked about what we can expect. And it's a heck of a lot more in terms of innovation. we're going to maybe see some grilled chicken sandwiches. They're testing bone-in wings again. They're upgrading their tenders in the Chicago market test.
Mm-hmm.
We could maybe see 2 burgers come to the U.S., including Big Arch, which has done really well overseas. And then there's that beverage line. So from the learnings from the now shuttered Cosmics concept, they facilitated a beverage test in 500 restaurants. It exceeded their expectations. We will see those beverages line up as part of the McCafe brand in the U.S. system nationwide this year. So that's going to be a whole nother conversation where we talk about Taco Bell's Live Más Cafe, or we talk Wendy's is doing a lot of beverages, Shake Shack, Burger King. Beverages is going to be another, again, probably topic of the year this year, as well as chicken sandwiches.
And as we'll talk about Dutch Bros here in a bit, there's good reason that everybody's chasing beverage right now, no doubt. Okay, we talked about Wendy's, we talked about McDonald's. Let's talk about Burger King. RBI also reported Burger King continuing to gain some momentum. Burger King enjoying positive sales comps. Popeyes, however, not so much. Let's start with Burger King. One thing I think it was interesting that you mentioned, Alicia, is how Wendy's did not have any attention on burger in the past year, and you will see more of that, and perhaps that's to blame. What's Burger King doing? Really drilling in on their burgers. They're really homing in on the Whopper, and they've got that Whopper for You program that seems to be really succeeding here. What's going on specifically with Burger King that is giving it the momentum that it has right now?
Really, it's a tale of two different tales in QSR burger right now. When you've got Wendy's down bad, Jack in the Box, was -7 plus in their most recent quarter. And then you've got McDonald's and Burger King cruising along, and then some. So Burger King was up 2.6. They did get a tailwind from SpongeBob, so we'll keep you posted.
In a few quarters, we're going to be talking about why SpongeBob took them down.
What I loved about that SpongeBob, that whole promotion from Burger King's perspective is they are really trying to get away from that creepy king marketing and more toward families. This was it. They had the highest incident of kids meals in 10 years. So the SpongeBob meal garnered new guests. Those new guests continued to come in January after the promotion ended. Burger King also had a lot of success with its $5 duos and $7 trios menu, a very consistent value platform, again, that I think Wendy's has been missing. Now, we'll see if that trajectory changes for Wendy's, because they just came out with a biggie bundle, biggie bag in January. So we'll see if that conversation changes for Wendy's. But for Burger King, they have been pushing $5 duos, $7 trios for quite some time. It's been consistent. And it's worked because customers know what to expect. And again, to go back and really push this point home, because I think it's that critical in this environment when there's so much noise and customers don't know what to expect and the headlines are pretty ominous day to day. They just want to know what to expect from a restaurant. And so offering $5 duos and $7 trios is going to do that. I do think, Burger King did have some not as great news on the franchise profitability side. That is out of their control. Beef prices were up 20%, but that is, franchisee profitability is their main focus as part of the Reclaim the Fame investments that it started in 2022. So that's kind of a bummer. Beef prices are out of control still.
Yeah.
But to your point, that Whopper, I had a conversation with their chief marketing officer and Bowling Green State University graduate, Joel Yashinsky, about how they're Burger King. They're not going to stray from that. And this Whopper by You platform has been a tremendous success because they're giving customers control over some of the stuff they're doing. And I've got an embargo that lifts on Monday. I know this is coming out after that, but they're pushing the gas on giving customers control. They've got some really cool stuff on, I guess, co-collaboration and co-ideation with their customers. And I think that is going to be a fun story to follow for the foreseeable future for this brand.
I've maybe said this before, but I love the direction of focusing on kids, less on that young, hungry guy that some other burger competitors like Carl's Jr. just came out with a Paris Hilton campaign. I think you and I might have had PTSD from 2011 when, that was a thing that people did. But I do not believe, Alicia, that my children have ever had Burger King. And now, again, we're a Wendy's family because we're in Columbus, but they love McDonald's too. And they have never once asked me about Burger King. Frankly, we don't have one so close. But I do think there's such an opportunity to focus on the kids' business here. And it's not like the Creepy King would scare any of us away necessarily, but I've not been given a reason yet to take my kids into Burger King. We're not a SpongeBob family, so that wasn't going to be it. But there's going to be an opportunity sometime soon that I'm going to need to take my kids into Burger King because they saw this, that, or the other thing that dragged them in there and they had to try it. And for all we know, it's going to be their favorite burger place. I don't know. But the point is this is an opportunity Burger King needs to focus on. We got to talk about Popeyes. Popeyes was down. Popeyes once the belle of the ball. I mean, 5-6 years ago when, they were coming off of chicken sandwich high, and then they used that momentum to really cruise through COVID. But now struggling to find firm footing. Their comps were down. Alicia, why is Popeyes unable to figure this out?
Negative 4.9.
Pretty bad.
That's not great, especially with KFC up 1. So there's a weird market share, wave and I don't know, ebb and flow in burger and chicken right now.
Weird. Yeah.
But Popeye's negative 4.9 was their worst quarterly performance of 2025, which was negative, by the way, every quarter. And so Popeyes, they basically same as Wendy's. They took their eye off the ball. And they had like a pickle menu, last year, for example. And it garnered sexy headlines and created some buzz, but it didn't sustain traffic or sales. And so Popeyes has just recently gone through a leadership change. They brought on Peter Perdue to be the president in November. Peter Perdue is an operations guy. He most recently served as the chief operations officer at their sibling chain, Burger King, US and Canada. That is by design. Popeyes not only took their ball off of their core menu, which they're getting back to, and that includes specifically bone-in tenders and that sandwich, which is their biggest equity. And they're also getting back to operational consistency. And if I post anything about Popeyes, that is the comment. Mine is terrible. The operations are terrible. The operations are inconsistent. The executive said that Peter Perdue has a mandate to get back to operational excellence. They're expanding their field operations team by 75%. They are hosting a general manager experience rally in the fall for the first time. They're pushing the gas on operations. And I want to mention Wendy's is doing this. Popeyes and Wendy's seemed very similar in terms of their calls. Get back to their core menu, their equities that made them Wendy's, their equities that made them Popeyes. That's burgers. That's this chicken sandwich. And then the operations piece. Wendy's is also expanding their field operations team by a significant amount. And so, we'll see where this goes. Popeyes is an interesting story to me right now, again, because as late as 2024, they were doing great. And so 2025 was just a really terrible year. So terrible that they have changed leadership after less than just over a year. So
yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah, it is something we were talking about before the call, Alicia, was just how unpredictable everything is right now. It's there's a lot of chaos in the marketplace. You can't say, oh, burger's doing well and chicken's not, or chicken's doing well and burger's not, because it's just all over the place. Hard to really say whether one thing is affecting the other. One thing we do know is we know that beverage is hot. As we were talking about before, beverages are very much the focus of attention for so many companies. And as we move into our extra serving portion of the episode, Alicia, we're going to bring on one of our colleagues to talk more about one of the leaders in beverage. Perhaps no surprise to hear that is Dutch Bros. Dutch Bros reported, and they continue to crush. And here to join us to talk more about Dutch Bros is senior editor Joanna Fantozzi. Joanna, welcome to Extra
Hello.
Serving.
Hi.
Joanna, we've been talking about there have been some highs and some lows this week when it comes to earnings. McDonald's did great. They are certainly on a high, almost 7% sales growth in the fourth quarter. They had their biggest sales day ever with their Grinch Meal. But then there have been some lows. Wendy's, big yikes, as I like to say. That was very, very bad. Popeyes not doing so good either. We've got another good story to talk about, positive results that we're going to dig into with you, and that's Dutch Bros. Joanna, Dutch Bros has been really cruising for a while now, but how big was the most recent quarter according to Dutch Bros report?
I feel like cruise control is almost a good way of explaining it. And I was actually thinking about this. I'm like, this is great news for them and not as good news for extra serving because it is more, there's more to talk about when there's crazy highs and lows. They are, they had yet another quarter of same store sales growth, revenue growth, double digit revenue growth. Still rolling out their food program, still working on brand penetration in new markets. Kind of just like doing their thing. So it's all
Okay,
I
well, that's all we
jokingly
have
was
for
like
the episode.
I was like I'm jokingly like it's a little bit boring. But I think that the most interesting tidbit actually had nothing to do with necessarily their overall performance, which was great as you said. But so they said that they opened their first walk-up window style store last quarter in November in Los Angeles and in downtown LA. And Christine Barone said it has since become since just November the highest performing store in their entire portfolio. That really stood out to me. I would have asked more for more information on that, but journalists are not allowed to ask questions in earnings calls. But I was hoping someone would, but they didn't.
Bad journalist.
um, but yeah, I thought it was really, really interesting to me because we're always saying how the drive-through coffee segment is kind of taking over coffee and just like, Starbucks, watch out. But as it turns out, I guess there's nothing quite like foot traffic. And because of this really crazy growth that they saw from this one store that just opened a couple of months ago, I think that they're probably going to take that as an indicator to start expanding more in urban areas. And I think that will really open them up to a new level of brand awareness and brand penetration. I will say, anytime I talk about to any of my friends in the Northeast here about, covering Dutch Bros, no one knows what I'm talking about. They still are not known here. So I do think it opens them up to, more possibilities. And clearly, walk-up windows work for them.
Well, you have to imagine caveat being that it being only open a couple of months. Of course, it's going to be doing really well right now. But still, if they're committing to more of this, it probably is exceeding expectations in a way that they didn't maybe necessarily expect it to. Has to be noted, Seven Brew opened a walk-up location as well here in Columbus, actually. I have not yet been, but you can see that these drive-through coffee brands perhaps are starting to look into that white space that is the urban locations, the walk-up locations. And that's fascinating when you consider that Starbucks really owns that to themselves to some degree, or not to themselves, but that's Starbucks bread and butter. And when we've talked so much about how could these brands be taking market share from Starbucks, well, that could be them really coming in on Starbucks territory. Joanna, you obviously cover Starbucks as well. What do you make of that? That like with Seven Brew and Dutch Bros both looking at these walk-up locations, the non-drive-through locations, could that be a direct shot at Starbucks and trying to take even more market share in the coffee business?
I think yes and no, because remember, these aren't cafes. These are just walk-up windows. So it's not like people can go and sit down. And
Mm-hmm.
and Starbucks is kind of veering left when it comes to that. They really they shut down their mobile only stores and are converting them into cafes, sit down cafes. And so they're kind of moving into that direction. And I will say that probably then Dutch Bros could take advantage of that in cities of Starbucks kind of shutting down those mobile only locations and kind of take over that white space, I should say.
Yeah. Dutch Bros, I mean, like you said, it's almost boring by now because it is having so much success. What as they look ahead, what should we expect from Dutch Bros? I'll never forget when I talked to Christine Barone last year as part of the Signature Series. She said they want 2029 locations by 2029. It seems to me like they're probably well on their way to that. They've got 3 years and a ton of momentum. But what are some other things that they see in the future for Dutch Bros as they said on their call?
Yeah, I think that they mentioned that they are well on their way to that 2029 number, and it is interesting because when they first said that, I believe it was in 2024, it sounded a little bit lofty, and now I don't think it is. They're more than halfway there. They're about 60% of the way there. I think it is very possible. Beyond that, they are for their outlook for 2026, they are predicting 3 to 5% same store sales growth, which is a little bit more modest than they saw this quarter particularly. And I think that that will be impacted a little bit, they said, by coffee prices worldwide and maybe tariffs and all the craziness with that. Um, but I think beyond that, they're just kind of looking to improve to continue rolling out that food program, which they said will be completed by the end of the year. And they are looking to continue to have people to sign up for the loyalty program, uh, more store locations, just kind of I just feel like it's just kind of like a machine of forward momentum.
Well, to your point, the people in the Northeast, even here in the Midwest, they've just started to really kick the door down here in Columbus and throughout Ohio and the Midwest. I mean, you just still have so many people who don't know what this brand is, and it just feels like kind of infinite white space. But for Seven Brew too, and I've mentioned on this podcast, but I find fascinating because I think this is going to play itself out in a lot more cities. Seven Brew and Dutch Bros are getting ready to open across the street from each other on one of the main thoroughfares here in Columbus, which fascinates me for a lot of reasons. But I'm over there a lot, and I'm going to have to avoid it more now because of the traffic issues that this is going to cause. But I mean, here are two brands, one of which didn't even exist until 8 or 9 years ago in Seven Brew's case. The other one that has not been a household name on the East Coast until recently, and they are going to go head to head in gobbling up all of this potential white space across America. We talked a couple weeks ago about how Dutch Bros acquired Clutch Coffee in North Carolina. You have to imagine there's going to be more consolidation. And then you just have the appetite for beverages from consumers. I mean, it really feels like there's no end to this story anytime soon, that we're going to see at least these two brands and the broader beverage category just continue to just be a wave that crashes across the country, I imagine, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sort of going against what I've said in the past, but I've always compared Dutch Bros and Starbucks performance. Probably easier since they're both public. But I do think that probably moving forward, especially looking at what Starbucks is trying to do right now, Dutch Bros and Seven Brew are definitely more direct competitors, as well as some of the smaller drive-through coffee chains. And I think that they're kind of doing similar things in terms of the energy drinks and focusing on kind of like colorful drink innovation and like the fun stickers and drive-through and just like focusing on that Gen Z demographic. And I think that they are probably more going to be more direct competitors, perhaps opening up across the street across the country. And Starbucks is kind of figuring out that more of that, I guess, niche of people that want to that might be a little bit older or want to sit down in the cafe, etc. So
Exciting to watch. All right, we're going to move into our lightning round portion of the episode. And I know the answer from Alicia, but I want her to say it anyway as we talk about this. What's your go to coffee order? Alicia, I know what you like to get, but you should say, because we're talking about Seven Brew, you got to talk about this. I mean, do you get it every day? How many times are you thinking,
No,
oh,
no, no. I'm at the age where I have to fight gravity. So those sugary drinks are few and far between. Um, a medium brunette on ice from Seven Brew. It is on my way home Friday morning from swim practice at Dutch Bros just opened across the street. It's one of our main thoroughfares. But yes, medium brunette on ice. I crave them. It's actually interesting how as soon as I get out of the pool, I'm like, all right, Now I get my brunette.
You've trained yourself now. You've trained your brain to crave that. Seven Brew thanks you for that. Joanna, you, I know, don't like coffee
I was gonna say, you know the answer to this for me too.
because you're a weirdo. So what's your go-to caffeinated vice? I will ask you, Joanna. Which you can't even have right now, right? You probably can't
Right,
even
yeah,
have it right
I'm
now.
not really currently pregnant, so not having really much caffeine right now, but, I've been really enjoying whenever I go into the office, the Starbucks is in the same building. It's on the ground floor, so I sometimes go there and I'll get some of the fun iced matchas with cold foams. I feel like those are fun to experiment with. But for me, it's more of like a fun treat than I need to have this caffeinated beverage at home. I am making, I just had green tea with honey this morning.
That sounds nice. That's something, a decaf version of that I would do at nighttime, I will say. I just bought myself a milk frother, so I'm exploring with different lattes and things like that at home because I've got the Nespresso and, I can make myself a nice little latte. But I am very curious. Seven Brew opened not far from me, but I am very curious as Dutch Bros and Seven Brew kind of race around the city to find my version of what you have, Alicia, because I at Starbucks tend to be that, like, let's try the sweet LTO that they have on. Like, what was it? Some cookie, something or other that they had, probably still have. But if they don't have that, I like a good mocha. I think I'm a baby when it comes to my coffee drinks. I do like that sweet stuff, but the nice little shot of energy at the same time. All right, that's all the time we have. We're actually going to roll now into an interview between our senior food and beverage editor, Bret Thorn, and Omar Arambula, who is the executive chef of Bravo, Brio. Alicia, Joanna, thanks as always.
To have new ownership at the restaurant or new management, I guess.
Right.
And so, and it sounds like they're trying to, sort of separate the two more, make them more different from each other. Is that right?
Yeah, I think the last I think 4 years, and immediately after COVID, I think the menus kind of just almost melted together just because of resources and things outside of our control. So we're trying to redo that, reseparate, and find out what each brand is. That's kind of what we're figuring out.
And so, what's your role in all of that?
So right now it's kind of in a discovery time. So we're really looking at, and my role specifically is in finding ideas and bringing them to the group of what the concept could potentially be as far as food is concerned. How do we define the individual concepts and what each one stands for and what the story is behind it? Because over time things get lost or lost in translation at least, and so we're trying to find that out and figure it out.
Yeah, they are two different concepts. It started out that way. So let's talk about each one separately. You pick one and talk about it, and then we'll talk about the next one.
I've been recently, and this is the project I think that's at the forefront, which is Bravo, something we're calling Bravo 2.0 or the new Bravo. And so I love Bravo. I'm spending a lot of time in the restaurants, a lot of time with the chefs who have been with our company for a while and asking questions, really just getting to know what Bravo is at its core and what new innovative food and ingredients we could bring into the mix that would really create a brand of its on its own. So that's really what I've been focusing on, and my job is really to figure out where that could potentially lead and just make a lot of food, which is a lot of fun for me. So we're doing a lot of R&D. Yeah,
Makes sense. And as I understand it, Bravo of the two is sort of the more family-oriented, casual, like big portions, fun,
right.
Italian kind of thing. Right?
Yeah, abundant portions is what we're looking at. More of a rustic feel, but still keeping with that traditional Italian authentic cuisine. So we've been talking a lot about like an authentic carbonara, doing an amatriciana. So bringing dishes like that into the mix, and then telling a story. So figuring out how we're going to tell that story and how we're going to present those dishes to our existing guests. Without alienating them, and introducing them to new flavors, bold flavors, and really what Bravo could be.
That's cool. Well, those are pasta dishes that, traditional Italian pasta dishes have to be kind of put together kind of quickly, right? Like this is
Right.
like sit and
Right.
hold. You got to cook it.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't have a dish sitting like that sitting in the window for too long. So it does change, and that's something we're working towards as well as getting the culture in our restaurants to support that. So that's part of the process of making new food is also, and the reason I talk to the chefs so often and get their involvement is because without their buy-in, we're not going to go anywhere. So it's really about teaching them, motivating them to do and to teach servers and the team members as well.
So each restaurant has an individual chef, right?
They do, yeah. Each restaurant has a chef.
Cool. And are they involved in the menu development process too?
Absolutely, yeah. That was one of the biggest pushes that we've been making is really getting them involved in that process. Again, back to the culture, something we've been talking about pretty consistently for the last 6 months. Just getting them more involved. They have great ideas. They have a lot of if you put together all our experience, it's over 1,000 years just in the chefs that we have, which is crazy, so it's really important to bring them along and to have them be part of the process of building Bravo 2.0. Yeah.
How many locations of Bravo and Brio are there? They're like
We have 44 locations
total, Bravo and Brio. Oh, okay. With more than 1,000 years of experience among all.
There's a lot of cooks and chefs and managers. There's a lot of information there that I like to download. I like to go talk to the cooks who are working at other locations. Who are working more of like the fine dining aspect. There's some cooks who also just bring ideas to the table, and they're like, hey, at this my other restaurant we make this great dish. Can I show it to you? I would love to see it. That's my quick response is let's do it. Let's make it. Let's learn from it. So it's all about sharing ideas.
So your chefs, like a lot of restaurant workers, can have multiple jobs and they could be cooking at different restaurants. Is that right?
Yeah, well, our chefs don't. Our chefs are really the head chef, at least the executive chefs in the restaurant. They're only working for us, but obviously the cooks and leads all work in multiple restaurants. Like that's just something that I did when I was young. That's just part of our industry. Yeah.
Right. Makes sense. So Bravo is big shoulders, family, big portions, but authentic Italian food.
Right.
How about Brio?
Brio, I use the word authentic specifically for Brio, because Brio's has been consistently more of like a coastal Tuscan style food. And so we're and what is Tuscan style food, right? It could be many things. And so we really want to define that and look at the strong dishes like our steaks. What kind of steak do we have? What are the sides that we're serving? Give the guests an option. So give them the ability to choose what their sides are, where they normally would get kind of set sides. And so Brio's more of the upscale version or concept. And so we have it's more what do we pair? What wine do we pair with it? What great drink do we have on our menu that pairs well with the pasta that you're having? And so that's kind of the route we're taking.
So it sounds like at Brio, it's well, both of them, but really at Brio, it's more than just we're developing new menu items. It's we're creating we're redefining the environment.
We're redefining the environment and redefining what our food is. So really, the menu items, I've only been with the company or with these two brands for four years now, let's say. So I'm looking back, and we're all looking back at historically what's been on the menu. And the menu, we come to find out the menu hasn't changed a whole lot. And so our guests love the food, but, we have to change with the times. And so we are looking to update. We are doing a lot of research, getting a lot of reports and really looking at the data of what guests want and what, the younger generation is looking for as well. So we can we can balance that.
So what do they want?
We find that they want more authentic food. They want fresh, bold flavors. They want, sometimes it doesn't necessarily have to be an Italian ingredient for it to be a great dish. So, introducing some worldly flavors, which, Italy is all about that. A lot of influences in Italy from different countries. So it's really kind of, we're playing into that a little bit, and then just finding out what the right portion sizes are, and what the guest prefers. Right now.
I mean, yeah, Italy's not a museum; it's a country, so the food keeps changing just like it does here.
Constantly, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are some flavors that you might bring in that aren't necessarily thought of as traditional Italian?
I've been playing with a lot of like Chinese flavors. There's a lot of like very flavorful sauces, like an XO sauce. I've been playing with a lot of reductions and marinades. Bravo currently uses a hoisin for their pork chop marinade, so that's something that we consistently use. And so it's always been part of the culture with Bravo and Brio, and so it's definitely something we're looking to bring back and kind of reintroduce in maybe a bigger and bolder way.
So what's your process for developing these new items?
So I grew up in a household. My parents are both Mexican, and so they came to this country, and my mom was a big fan of cookbooks, and it just happened to be Italian cookbooks, and so that's a process that I've always used. Just stealing it from her, which is a lot of what we do in this industry anyway. We borrow, we steal, we look and we reinterpret in our own way, and so I read a lot of cookbooks, and I do I do go through, make those recipes, and then with my experience and just using my experience in the culinary world, I reinterpret those dishes into something that will fit our brand, because there is a specific palette that also is associated with our brand. But also, I love to eat out. One of my favorite restaurants, and I know you're from New York, but Rolo's is one of my favorite restaurants, and they have like that two sheet pasta that I really love. And so just going out and getting inspiration, right, from the different places that we're eating at. Doesn't just have to be Italian. I do eat a lot of pasta, but here in LA we have a lot of cultures, and so it's easy to kind of, you could say, go into different countries just by walking a few blocks. And so I get to try a lot of different food, and that brings me a lot of inspiration into kind of what I want to do next into as far as food innovation.
Well, and it's funny, it's true, as you said, that the industry people borrow or steal or whatever or learn from each other, but just because you have a recipe doesn't mean you can serve it 60 times a night or 1,000 times a year. Like, it seems like that's where the real magic is.
Yeah, and that's part of the process also is over time, as you keep adding one or two recipes, your line changes, and so your cook's line changes, and so making it easier for our food to get to the guests. How quickly can we get the food to the guests, and also provide the highest quality and flavor that we possibly can. That's a big part of the process. That's usually step two for me, but it's always in the back of my mind, right? So if you're making a dish, you're always thinking, well, in the future, I'm going to put it in this section of the kitchen, and so how is that going to work with our current equipment and our capacities that we have in our restaurants?
So it sounds like a big part of the process is you go into the restaurants and you make this stuff and you see how it works.
Yes. I love cooking at home, but it's completely different. So it's nice to go into the restaurants and work side by side with the chefs, because as much as I'm in the restaurants, just from my experience in working in restaurants and, working the line and working those 14, 15-hour shifts, you know that it's completely different in the restaurant than it is in your home kitchen, or even on a slow shift. And so working side by side with the chefs and cooks, and them watching me make a dish, and then I teach them how to make it, and they're like, hey, may I suggest this little change that would really change my life if we were to move forward with this. And that's something that's really big for me is that development process of setting up the recipes and doing all that.
Does that require like setting your ego aside? Because some young kid might have really great ideas, and like you benefit from learning from them.
I agree. I think a long time ago, I definitely I learned from that. I used to have a big ego, like a lot of us do in this industry, right? It's really easy when you're making 100 pastas a night and you're pumping it out and you're the best in the kitchen. It's hard for somebody to come in and say, "Hey, try it this way," and you're like, "Hey, I just crushed this shift. So I don't understand why you're new and you're trying to tell me what to do." So I definitely I think back to those times and I'm like, hey, you know, ego aside, let's work through it. Yeah, you definitely have to you have to be humble in order to make it happen.
And did you grow up in LA?
I did. I grew up in LA, born in Pasadena. I'm born and raised in LA. So there's LA has been traditionally hasn't had a whole lot of pasta places, a whole lot of pasta restaurants. And so, one of my favorite chefs, even Funky, has a couple restaurants out here that I love. And so I draw a lot of inspiration from the restaurants out here. But again, I grew up eating Thai food once a week. I grew up eating, I grew up in Glendale, so there was a lot of Russian, Armenian food. And so, there's a lot of influences from that I really have, and techniques that I really learned in restaurants and working there. And so I picked that up and try to bring it into our restaurants and innovate that way.